When a CEO orders a young man to fix a broken machine, he has no idea that he's about to encounter a powerful secret, a secret that will change everything. What happens next will challenge his assumptions and alter his life in unimaginable ways. In any business, a CEO's role often revolves around decision-making and overseeing the company's strategic vision. Their daily tasks are generally focused on high-level objectives, driving growth, expanding market reach, and maintaining a steady flow of operations. They rarely concern themselves with the granular details of production or the day-to-day struggles of the workers beneath them. So when a CEO of a major manufacturing company walks into the factory floor for a routine inspection, it's not surprising that he pays little attention to the workers on the ground. His focus is on efficiency, output, and profits, faceless aspects of the machinery that keep the company running smoothly. The factory in question, a sprawling facility built to produce agricultural equipment, is one of the company's crown jewels. With thousands of employees and a high level of automation, it runs like a well-oiled machine, pun intended. However, as with all mechanical systems, there are moments when things break down. Equipment malfunctions are an unfortunate reality in manufacturing, and a CEO accustomed to dealing with the aftermath of such events has learned to delegate problems to subordinates. So, when one of the machines on the factory floor stops working during his visit, the CEO sees it as nothing more than a temporary hiccup. He directs his attention to the faulty machine, a heavy-duty agricultural plow that has ground to a halt mid-production. The machine is important because it represents one of the company's best-selling products, and a delay in its repair could result in a serious disruption in the production line. Naturally, the CEO is not concerned with the specifics of the repair process. Rather, he is concerned with keeping everything running as efficiently as possible. He gives a quick, matter-of-fact instruction to the factory manager: find someone to fix it and get it up and running. No delays. The factory manager, who has worked under this CEO for several years, immediately begins assessing the situation, his eyes scanning the surrounding workers for the most suitable candidate. Most of the workers, however, are not exactly trained engineers, but are more accustomed to handling basic manual tasks or managing operations on the floor. The factory manager looks around for someone who might have the skills needed to tackle the repair. His gaze lands on a young man who, though not in a managerial position, has a certain calmness about him, a quiet competence that stands out. The young man, dressed in the factory's standard uniform, looks up at the factory manager with a neutral expression, unaware of the pivotal role he is about to play. The factory manager approaches him and, in an offhand manner, asks, "You think you can fix this?" The young man, who goes by the name of Elijah, doesn't hesitate. His fingers are already instinctively reaching for his toolkit, and without a word, he walks over to the machine. The CEO, who has been observing the scene from a distance, now takes note of the worker. He is accustomed to seeing laborers who shuffle around the factory floor, but Elijah stands out. There's an assuredness to his movements, a confidence that suggests he's more than just an average worker. This moment, seemingly insignificant in the grand scheme of the factory's operations, marks the beginning of an unexpected encounter. The CEO, though still absorbed in his thoughts about the factory's productivity, can't help but feel a curiosity about Elijah. The young man exudes a sense of purpose, and the CEO wonders briefly where this worker has come from, but brushes the thought away just as quickly. Elijah begins to work on the machine, effortlessly dismantling the various parts with precision and speed. The factory manager, who is usually quick to critique or point out mistakes, stands silent, impressed by the young man's methodical approach. The machine had been a challenge for many of the factory's seasoned workers, yet Elijah seems to know exactly what needs to be done. Within minutes, the clattering and grinding of tools fills the air as Elijah expertly diagnoses the problem. It's a problem that many technicians would have struggled with, yet Elijah handles it like a seasoned mechanic, not a worker merely filling in for the day. The CEO, observing from a distance, begins to feel an unusual unease, an unspoken tension. It's not the discomfort that comes from being in the presence of a malfunctioning machine, nor is it the typical irritation one might feel when things are not going according to plan. Instead, it's an odd sense of curiosity mixed with something deeper, a feeling that he's witnessing something far more significant than just a simple machine repair. He watches intently as Elijah continues to work, oblivious to the CEO's gaze. As time passes, the CEO becomes increasingly aware that this is no ordinary worker. There's an unspoken connection between the two, the young man and the machine, as if Elijah, somehow, knows it better than anyone else. As the final part is placed back into the machine, Elijah takes a step back and inspects his work. The machine, once silent, roars to life again with a sound that reverberates through the factory. It's a small victory, one that goes unnoticed by most, but for Elijah, it's a moment of quiet triumph. The CEO, still watching from the sidelines, finally realizes that this encounter, this brief interaction, is more than just a random meeting. The young man has fixed the machine with an almost effortless skill, but there's something more to him, something the CEO can't quite place. Who is this worker, and how did he come to possess such knowledge and expertise? The CEO has no idea that this seemingly insignificant repair job will set in motion a series of events that will challenge everything he believes about privilege, power, and identity. At that moment, the CEO could not know that Elijah is the son of someone with far more influence than he could ever have imagined. And as the machine hums back to life, so too does the unraveling of a powerful secret, one that will change everything. Elijah's hands have always been at home with tools. From a young age, he was taught how to repair and maintain the machinery that was essential for his family's farm. The hum of an engine, the rhythmic screech of a wrench tightening a bolt, these were sounds he grew up with. They were as familiar as the rustling of leaves in the wind or the croak of frogs in the nearby pond. Life on the farm required an intimate knowledge of mechanics, because everything from tractors to irrigation pumps had to be in working order to keep the farm running. Elijah had an innate understanding of these machines, but his ability to fix them was born not out of desire, but necessity. The farm had always been more than just a place of work. It was his family's legacy, and Elijah felt its weight from the day he was born. His father, a hard-working man who had spent his life toiling the fields, had passed down not only the skills of farming but a deep sense of responsibility. Elijah's upbringing was steeped in tradition, and every decision in his life, from the food he ate to the shoes on his feet, carried the imprint of his family's history. Yet despite his father's best efforts to raise him with an appreciation for the hard work that came with being a farmer, Elijah always felt a gnawing sense of something greater calling him, a quiet restlessness that he couldn't shake. In the small rural town where Elijah grew up, the rhythm of life was set to the seasons. The crops would come in, the harvests would be collected, and the cycle would begin again. There was no time for distraction, no room for ambition beyond the land that sustained the family. From an early age, Elijah knew his place. He was expected to take over the farm one day, to continue the work his father had started, and to pass it down to his own children. But deep down, he always knew that he wasn't like the others in his family. His heart didn't belong entirely to the land. His mind was always drawn to the world beyond. Despite his exceptional mechanical skills, Elijah never believed that he was destined for anything other than farm work. The small-town mentality surrounded him, and it felt as though there was little to aspire to beyond the fields. Most people in the community never looked beyond the narrow horizon of their lives. They were content in their work, satisfied with the certainty it provided. Elijah, however, had always looked towards something more. It was a quiet longing, a desire to move beyond the shackles of a life defined by a single trade. When the opportunity came to leave the farm for the factory job, it was not because Elijah dreamed of a better life in the city, but because he saw it as a chance to learn something new, to see the world beyond the land. The factory represented a world that, although foreign, held an allure of progress, of machinery that wasn't bound by the limits of a farm. It wasn't an escape, but rather an evolution of his skills. He knew he could fix machines, but he didn't know how to work in a world that relied on machines in ways he couldn't even fathom. His quiet demeanor, often mistaken for a lack of ambition or drive, was in fact a shield. Elijah was not one to boast about his capabilities. He never sought attention. His hands did the talking for him, and his work spoke volumes. It wasn't in his nature to seek recognition. In a world that valued loud voices and grand gestures, Elijah's subtle approach to life often left him in the background, unnoticed. He preferred it that way, feeling more at ease with his tools than with people. The factory job, while offering a chance for a new life, also brought him closer to a truth he had spent his life avoiding. He wasn't just a farm boy. He was a man with the power to change things, if only he could see it for himself. As Elijah worked on the machine, the steady rhythm of his movements was a reflection of years spent fine-tuning his craft. With each turn of the wrench, a quiet sense of pride washed over him. This was what he was good at. He didn't need the validation of others to know his worth. He had learned from his father that hard work didn't need applause. It was the foundation of success. Yet, as his hands moved over the machine, a deeper story unfolded within him, one of quiet resilience and the weight of generations that had come before him. His family's history was one of endurance, of surviving against the odds. From his father, he inherited a sense of duty to the land, to the farm, but also a hidden strength that had allowed Elijah to push against the current. While others had contented themselves with the cycle of farm life, Elijah had quietly rebelled by dreaming of something more. But it wasn't the dream of wealth or fame that called to him. It was the need to prove to himself that he could transcend the limitations that had been placed on him by birth and circumstance. Every time he fixed a machine, it was an act of defiance. It was Elijah's way of asserting that he was more than just a product of his environment. The work he did, though rooted in his family's traditions, became a form of personal expression. It was the only way he knew how to communicate what was stirring inside him. The factory job, in its own way, was a form of rebellion, a chance to assert his individuality, to prove to the world that the farm didn't define him. But it was also a challenge. Elijah was stepping into a world that wasn't his own, one that wasn't built on the same values of hard labor and resilience. Here, in the factory, the machines were more than just tools. They were symbols of a modern, industrial world that required more than just manual labor to succeed. It was a world of constant innovation, of technology and machinery that operated on a scale far beyond what he had ever known. Yet, despite the intimidating environment, Elijah never faltered. His ability to repair machines was no longer just about fixing something that was broken. It was about proving to himself that he could fix more than just the physical world around him. It was about rebuilding his own sense of purpose. As the machine hums back to life, the CEO feels a sudden sense of unease that he can't quite shake. His gaze remains fixed on the young man, whose hands move with a practiced grace that is both efficient and assured. The repair, a task that had seemed formidable moments before, is completed with an ease that leaves the CEO momentarily speechless. He has seen mechanics work on machines before, but never with such precision and calm. It is as though the machine itself has become an extension of the young man's will, responding instantly to every adjustment. The CEO, accustomed to being in control and surrounded by individuals who are equally skilled at their respective jobs, suddenly finds himself questioning his own assumptions. For the first time in a long while, he feels a twinge of doubt about the people around him. How can this young man, who, to his knowledge, has worked in the factory for only a short time, fix this machine so effortlessly? The CEO's mind begins to race, trying to piece together an explanation. He is a man who prides himself on understanding people at a glance, but Elijah's quiet confidence throws him off balance. As the young man steps back from the machine, wiping his hands on his uniform, the CEO feels a strange pull to learn more about him. There is something about his demeanor, something familiar, that piques the CEO's curiosity. It is not that the young man is extraordinary in the conventional sense. He does not stand out in a crowd, nor does he speak loudly. But there is an unspoken energy about him that makes it hard for the CEO to dismiss him as just another worker. The familiarity nags at him, but the CEO cannot pinpoint why. The CEO's internal dilemma intensifies. He has always seen himself as a man of competence, someone who is quick to assess situations and people. His sharpness in business decisions, his ability to size up others, and his deep understanding of power dynamics have always been his strongest assets. He has built his career on the belief that he can control any situation and understand the motivations of those around him. Yet, standing here, watching the young man work, he is confronted with a feeling he has rarely experienced: confusion. In the world that the CEO inhabits, control and certainty are paramount. Every decision he makes is calculated, and he surrounds himself with people who reflect his own values and abilities. He values efficiency, progress, and the ability to adapt quickly to any challenge. Yet, Elijah does not conform to the typical mold of the factory worker. There is something about his quiet strength, his unspoken skill, and the way he engages with the machinery that sets him apart. For the first time, the CEO finds himself unsure of the very system he has spent his life navigating. He had assumed that everyone around him had a defined role, that their worth could be easily categorized. But this young man, Elijah, defies those simple categories. As the machine powers back on, the CEO finds himself revisiting every previous assumption he has ever had about people in positions of manual labor. His mind flashes to other workers he has seen in the factory, the ones who are loud, outspoken, and eager to be noticed. They wear their skills as a badge of honor, hoping that recognition will follow. But Elijah is different. He doesn't seek validation, doesn't speak much, and yet he commands attention simply by doing his job. It is as though his presence alone carries weight, making the CEO question his own priorities and values. This introspection brings about a wave of discomfort. The CEO, a man used to feeling superior in every situation, now finds himself grappling with an unsettling sense of insecurity. Who is this young man? Why does he seem so familiar to the CEO, even though they have never met before? There is a nagging sensation in the back of his mind that something is missing, a crucial piece of information that could explain the young man's impact on him. The more the CEO reflects on this feeling, the more the pieces of the puzzle start to fall into place. It is then that a possibility begins to form in his mind, one that challenges everything he thought he knew about identity, privilege, and power. The familiarity he senses is not just the result of a shared connection in the workplace. No, it is something deeper, something more fundamental. As the CEO continues to watch Elijah, his mind races to a time long past, a memory of a different life, one that involves a man whose influence he had long forgotten. The young man standing before him, working with a quiet intensity, might be connected to that man in ways the CEO is not yet prepared to comprehend. The momentary discomfort grows into a powerful realization. The young man is more than just a worker in his factory. Elijah is linked to a past that the CEO has carefully kept buried, an uncomfortable past that forces him to confront the biases and assumptions that have shaped his worldview. This revelation, though still unclear, is enough to make the CEO question his entire approach to leadership, power, and privilege. He cannot help but wonder whether his success has been built on the backs of people like Elijah, people whose talents have gone unnoticed, and whose potential has been ignored or underestimated. In that instant, the CEO knows that everything has changed. He is no longer the man who controls every situation with calculated ease. The young man, standing before him with quiet dignity, has shaken the very foundations of the CEO's understanding of his world. The revelation comes unexpectedly, a moment of profound realization that shakes the CEO to his very core. What had started as a simple request to fix a broken machine, something that, in the grand scheme of the company, was a minor issue, now turns into a defining moment, one that will forever alter the trajectory of both the young man's life and the CEO's own. The young man, Elijah, stands before the CEO, his expression as calm as ever, but something in the air shifts. There is an unspoken tension that ripples through the room, and the CEO senses that the time has come for something important to be revealed. Elijah speaks in a low, steady voice. His words, though not dramatic or laced with emotion, carry a weight far beyond their simplicity. He is not one to boast or to make grand declarations, but in this moment, his revelation is one that echoes with the gravity of history and the consequences of past actions. As he finally shares his identity, the CEO's world begins to unravel. Elijah is not merely a skilled mechanic, an anonymous worker in the factory. He is the son of a man whom the CEO once wronged, an influential figure whose power reaches far beyond the realm of the CEO's understanding. The CEO's mind races as Elijah speaks. The name, once a distant echo from his past, suddenly carries immense significance. It is a name that the CEO had long since relegated to the recesses of his memory, a name that was tied to an event he had worked hard to bury. Years ago, in a move driven by greed and a desire for control, the CEO had made a decision that had irrevocably harmed Elijah's father. The CEO had used his position to outmaneuver and undermine the man, seizing business opportunities that rightfully belonged to him, and leaving him in a vulnerable position that ultimately led to financial ruin. At the time, the CEO had justified his actions as a necessary part of doing business, a way to secure his company's future. But now, in the face of this revelation, those justifications feel hollow, and the weight of the past presses heavily upon him. The impact of this revelation is immediate and profound. The CEO's mind reels as he tries to process the magnitude of what Elijah is saying. It's not just a simple fact that Elijah's father is a powerful figure. His father is the very person who the CEO once wronged, the one whose life he irrevocably altered through his own selfish ambition. The layers of the situation begin to unfold before him, each one more complex and far-reaching than he could have ever imagined. The past, once buried and forgotten, has resurfaced in the most unexpected of ways. The revelation is not just a personal blow to the CEO, it is a crisis of conscience, one that forces him to confront the darker parts of his own character. The actions he took years ago, the choices that seemed justified at the time, now appear as blatant examples of manipulation and exploitation. The CEO is left grappling with the realization that the power he has accumulated was, in part, built on the destruction of others, and that Elijah's father, the man he wronged, had been far more influential than he had ever realized. The power dynamics that the CEO had always assumed were in his favor now appear in a different light. His own success, his rise to the top, was not a product of sheer brilliance and effort alone, but of ruthless decisions made at the expense of others. For Elijah, this moment of revelation is not one of vengeance or anger. It is one of quiet resolution. He has known the truth for years, but the time to confront it has finally arrived. In revealing his identity to the CEO, Elijah is not seeking retribution. He is seeking acknowledgement. Acknowledgement of the wrongs that were committed against his father, of the legacy that was stolen, and of the man Elijah has become in the shadow of those past injustices. For years, Elijah had carried the burden of his father's defeat, but now, standing before the man who caused that defeat, he seeks to release that burden, to make the past known and to find a way to move forward. The CEO, though initially stunned, cannot ignore the truth of what has been revealed. He is forced to reckon with the impact of his actions, to confront the consequences of the choices he made long ago. The revelation has not only altered his perception of Elijah, but has fundamentally shifted his understanding of power, privilege, and responsibility. He begins to realize that the world he has built, the empire he has fought to maintain, was not the product of his own ingenuity alone. It was, in part, the result of the suffering of others, of individuals like Elijah and his father who had been marginalized, overlooked, and taken advantage of. The stir caused by this revelation ripples throughout the company. Word spreads quickly, and the news of Elijah's true identity becomes a topic of conversation among employees, management, and even shareholders. The revelation shakes the foundation of the company, causing many to question the ethical practices that have guided its operations for years. The power structures that once seemed unassailable now come into question, as the company must now reckon with its history and the people it has wronged in the pursuit of success. For the CEO, this moment is a turning point. He is no longer simply a man in control of a corporation. He is a man confronting his own legacy, his own actions, and the way those actions have affected the lives of others. This moment of truth, though difficult and painful, is also a moment of redemption, a chance for the CEO to reassess his values and make amends for the wrongs of the past. The power struggle that has defined his career is no longer about domination and control. It is now about reconciliation and responsibility. The CEO realizes that, in order to truly move forward, he must face the consequences of his past and take responsibility for the legacy he has created. What began as a simple request to fix a machine has now spiraled into a confrontation of legacies, power, and redemption. The course of events that has led to this point is nothing short of transformative, not just for Elijah, but for the CEO as well. The path forward is uncertain, but the revelation has set in motion a series of events that will forever change the lives of both men. The revelation that Elijah is the son of the man the CEO once wronged has a profound and far-reaching impact that extends beyond the immediate personal exchange between the two men. For the CEO, the truth forces him to reckon with the very foundations of his life's work, his career, his reputation, and his identity as a leader. The impact of this revelation shakes him to his core, forcing him to confront the consequences of his past actions and the ripples they have caused in ways he had never anticipated. The CEO, a man who has spent his career climbing the corporate ladder, prides himself on his ability to navigate complex power dynamics and build an empire. His success has been built on his business acumen, his strategic thinking, and his ability to seize opportunities when they arise. But as the truth about Elijah's identity comes to light, the CEO begins to question the very foundation of his success. His career, which he once viewed as a testament to his skill and determination, now appears in a different light. The CEO realizes that much of his rise to power was not solely the result of his abilities, but also due to the manipulation of circumstances and the exploitation of those around him. The realization that his success has come at the expense of others, especially of Elijah's father, forces the CEO to reconsider the moral and ethical principles that have guided his actions throughout his life. The revelation also forces the CEO to re-examine his understanding of power. Throughout his career, he has defined success as the ability to dominate and control, to secure his position at the top of the corporate hierarchy. His vision of leadership has always been one of authority and influence, driven by the desire to maintain control over every situation. But now, faced with the consequences of his past actions, he begins to question whether true power lies in domination or in the ability to rectify wrongs, to rebuild what has been broken, and to make amends for past mistakes. For the first time in his life, the CEO realizes that power, in its truest sense, is not about maintaining control, but about taking responsibility and making things right. The young man, Elijah, whose quiet competence had initially gone unnoticed, now holds the key to rewriting the story of his family's legacy. Elijah's father, once a powerful and influential figure, had been brought to the brink of ruin by the CEO's actions. Yet, despite the hardship and loss, Elijah has remained steadfast in his resolve. The truth of his identity now gives him the power to challenge the very systems that allowed his family's downfall. Elijah's quiet strength, his knowledge of machines, and his understanding of the world all carry a weight far beyond his role in the factory. He is no longer just a mechanic. He is the embodiment of his father's legacy, the one who carries the responsibility of rewriting a story that had been unjustly erased. With this newfound understanding of his own power, Elijah must navigate the complexities of a world that had once denied him his rightful place. As Elijah confronts the reality of his identity, he is forced to reconcile with the past. The revelation does not come with a sense of vengeance or anger. Rather, it carries with it the responsibility of carrying his father's story forward. For years, Elijah had worked quietly in the shadows, aware of the injustice done to his father, but unable to change it. Now, with the truth revealed, he must decide how to use his power. He is no longer a passive figure in his own life. He is an active participant in reshaping the course of his family's history. This newfound power is not just a weapon to right the wrongs done to his father, but an opportunity to build something greater than himself, to create a legacy that will be defined by integrity, strength, and honor. For both the CEO and Elijah, the impact of this revelation forces them to reconsider what it means to truly fix what is broken, not just in machines, but in the world around them. The CEO must come to terms with the fact that fixing what is broken in his life requires more than simply repairing the damage done to his company's reputation or financial standing. It requires acknowledging the human cost of his decisions, the lives that were affected by his pursuit of success. In this sense, the CEO is forced to confront the brokenness, not just of the machine, but of the moral fabric that has guided his actions. For Elijah, fixing what is broken means more than just restoring his father's reputation. It means finding a way to heal the wounds caused by years of neglect, exploitation, and injustice. It means breaking the cycle of hardship that has defined his family's history and building a future that is grounded in respect and fairness. The weight of this responsibility is immense, but it is also the catalyst for Elijah's transformation. He is no longer just the son of a man who was wronged. He is a man with the power to change the course of his family's legacy, to build something that reflects the values of integrity, hard work, and respect for others. The impact of this revelation extends beyond just these two men. It ripples through the company, the community, and even the industry at large. The power dynamics that once seemed unassailable are now in flux. The CEO's revelation forces everyone to reconsider their roles within the system, to reflect on the ethical implications of their actions, and to confront the hidden forces that have shaped their success. The company, once a symbol of power and control, is now faced with the consequences of its past. The employees, the managers, and the stakeholders must all reckon with the reality that the systems they have worked within are not as fair and just as they once believed. As Elijah and the CEO navigate this newfound power dynamic, both men must confront the deeper questions of what it means to rebuild and to make amends. For the CEO, it means confronting the consequences of his actions and striving to create a more equitable and ethical company. For Elijah, it means taking responsibility for his family's legacy and finding a way to build a future that reflects the lessons of the past. Together, they must work to repair what has been broken, not just in machines, but in the systems and relationships that have shaped their world. The path forward is uncertain, but the revelation has set in motion a process of healing, redemption, and transformation for both men.